Right, this recording, right, it's based on psychological deception. So this isn't even conspiracy, but based on, psychology, the mind. And anyone knows psychology is something that exists. No bullshit, no conspiracy, all actual, factual. Something I've actually studied and analysed without, as I said before, without even studying it myself. Just naturally studied. I'm just going to go through this psychological deception anyway. And this is based on mainstream media. So, taking away the conspiracy of this Illuminati stuff and all this stuff. This is just based on, we'll take away the Illuminati conspiracy and all the higher power stuff, and we'll base it on government and stuff like that, which I'll leave to show that, these corporations are owned by the media, government as well, who own these mainstream media outlets. And the proof, which I'll leave some video clips of proof actually from these mainstream channels, that where lies have been told for starters, and these are actually official sources. But we'll start with psychological deception. What it basically is, psychological deception, is using people's minds against them. It's basically changing their perspective and perception of what they're told, either through words or even visual images, or even, like videos, TV and stuff like that. I'll start with and this is Sun Tzu, if you know this dude. Sun Tzu, he was a general, I think, made a book called The Art of War, and this was based on psychological deception against the enemy. When engaging in wars and stuff like that, basically to attack your enemy without them expecting it, using psychological deception, this technique. When I was reading through the quotes, I was understanding what he meant, and it doesn't even have to be to do with war. But what I'll start off with is one of these things from The Art of War is, he says, engage people with what they expect. It is what they are able to discern and confirm their projections. It settles them into predictable patterns of response, occupying their minds while you want for the extraordinary moment, that which they cannot anticipate. That through that, what I read that as, based on media deception, engage people with what they expect is, basically use a lie, use deception through the mainstream media, like false flag attack like 9/11, for example. Make them, believe, it is what they're able to discern and confirms their projections. From the projection, what the mainstream media give to them makes their perspective and perception see what they've been told to see. It settles them in predictable patterns of response, occupying their minds while you wait for that extraordinary moment which they can anticipate. Briefly, without going too into it, all I'll briefly mention the Illuminati New World Order stuff, what I've gone about. Why that distraction basically is there from what they've been led to believe. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. They're waiting to basically attack you, why they're led to believe these things. And that's through psychological deception. That can be used as a use for war, but it can be used if someone wanted to use the same tactic through psychological deception, with mainstream media or anything, you could use it in any application against people like your enemy, in which I'm saying people of the world who don't know about this stuff are their enemy, but they believe they're not, basically same as Edward Snowden, what I left in that video. This is another thing based on that, but to do with, based from what he was taught and stuff when he worked for the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, NSA, National Security Association, I think it's called, for America. When he was trained and he was taught about this stuff as an agent in both agencies, he would have been told about this thing, what I'll leave on the video, where they use any bad decisions you've made or even manipulate things and then paint a picture of a decent person into a bad person, using manipulated and not full, thorough evidence about their background. That's a good example of a media deception. I don't know what they used against him. I never heard it. But, they can do that to a lot of people. So, that's another form of psychological deception, showing people what they see, and for them to, whatever the perception and what they're showing is showing they believe, based on what I said, especially what Sun Tzu said. He also used through psychological deception. So you can see the technique behind psychological deception and fooling people to your enemy, to whatever you want to use it as. And here's another form of psychological deception again, deception more. If you see politicians, you can see maybe seen it in newspapers. Politicians you always see, mostly if you've analysed from memory, whether it's Tony Blair, David Cameron, Obama, any like that, they always go to hospitals and they're always shaking hands with sick patients and stuff. It's that perception again, the deception brought across that, basically, ask yourself what you see yourself when you see them. What your mind's thinking, are they a nice person, they're humane, they're people's person. That's actually used against you without realising. It's like subliminal. And, they deliberately do that, because, coincidentally, every time they go to these hospitals, they're always doing that. And, another thing I analysed, and this is from memory as well, what I used to see before I started seeing, politicians, I've seen Netanyahu, David Cameron, Obama themselves again, where they wear dress casual clothes. And, what do you think again when you see them? Subconsciously maybe, or genuinely, partially when you see them, what does your mind think again when you see them? You see them as normal people like you, because they're not wearing the suit that you always see them in. As a political leader, you see them in everyday wear, so it makes them more of a normal, casual person. It makes them look more innocent, basically, and that's psychological deception again, which these people study, referring back to Edward Snowden especially, where he was trained about that, when if basically what he used as an example, someone like him or anyone that goes against agencies like that, they use that technique, using the technology and their past, what they have in records against those people, and then they paint a picture using that deception and perception of not thorough evidence, but things to make them look bad. So psychological deception is the main part of mainstream media. And if you do your research, you will find out that, they're government owned. If you don't want to go into the crazy stuff you don't believe is Illuminati and secret societies and all that stuff, just put it in that one, right, if we leave it on that basis. Here's another one what we'll go into, another Sun Tzu quote again, where he said, the art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a roadie, either to safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. So basically, the art of war to this, to the state, the art of deception to the public of those countries is important to the state, the country. It is a matter of life and death, a road of either to safety or ruin. A ride of either safety to ruin safety of our secrets, what we're actually hiding from them, or to ruin to be exposed. Hence it is a subject of inquiry which can no account be neglected. In that way, subject of inquiry which cannot be neglected. Basically based on that, it's basically saying, that using deception, it needs to be hidden, and it can't be violated or investigated to find out our lies and that. And when it comes to this, I'll leave the link on the video and the types of deception. This is basically from Wikipedia, and I'm sure most people, even skeptical, know Wikipedia or would trust that site anyway. And this is through psychological researched what people have used, and it's nothing to do with war. Let's just say this: when you look at an article, this is basically to do with relationships, friendships, but you know, this can be used in the same application because it's psychological, can be used in different applications. You know, types of deception are lies, making up information or giving information that is opposite or very different from the truth. You know, we can use this as false flag operations 9/11/77. You know, using the perception and perspective of what people are shown to see, you know, which is the opposite of what the truth is, you know, what you're shown you believe. And then making an indirect, ambitious or contradictory statement. You know, that's basically, again, through deception, you know, and if it ends up being contradictory, we can talk about conspiracy videos, you know, what say it was contradictory to what they said and what's different to what you've been told through that deception. Concealment, submitting information that is important or relevant to the given context, or engaging in behaviour that helps hide relevant information. You know, that's omitting information that is important or relevant to the given context, concealments. That's basically like one of those media deceptions things. You know, the relevant to the or given context would be the what led from 9/11, like Afghanistan, Iraq, and everything that's gone from there. You know, omitting information that is important, basically what they want you to see, referring back to the Edward Snowden thing, not giving you the full information. You know, stuff like that. And, you know, engaging in behaviour that helps hide the relevant information. That's basically, you know, anyone who basically, you know, and confronts them and says, you know, like conspiracy theorists, and says, oh, how come this, how come that, how come the jet fuel thing, which can't melt the steel beams. You know, basically, you know, avoiding that more than engaging it. Exaggerations, overstatement, or stretching the truth to a degree where, you know, we can move that to the Islam thing, Bin Laden and stuff like that, you know, making it so out of context. But when you find out stuff like, and you can research, you know, like Bin Laden used to be a CIA, worked for the CIA in Afghanistan back in about, I think it's 79 to 89, something to do with helping the CIA take out, I think it was the Russian mafia or something like that, who were working on the soil there, who were basically their opposition, you know, like their enemy, as we can see where Russia's being the enemy again, same as Cold War, but in this predicted World War, what's coming up, World War III, whatever you want to call it. You know, there was a lot behind Bin Laden to that, you know, that he actually worked for them, which doesn't make sense about this 9/11. And the statements, minimisation or downplaying the aspects of the truth, you know, basically, you know, hiding the truth is another way of putting it, you know, taking away what's behind closed doors, as they say, what you don't really know, use for that perception and deception they use through mainstream media. And then we'll go, you know, on motives. What we're talking about is media deception, right? And, you know, who owns them. And, you know, as I said, this is actually through what this article, which I'll link, is based on, is basically different. It's basically to do with relationships, friendships, and that. But, you know, if you use it in the context of corporate-owned media owned by the government, the motives, you know, the relationships between the public and the government. And basically, there are three primary motivations for deceptions in close relationships, i.e. relationship between government and public. And motives, there are three primary motivations for deceptions in close relationships, media, government, with public. Partner-focused motives, using deception to avoid hurting the partner, to help the partner to enhance and maintain his or her self-esteem. In media terms, you know, make the public feel important and, you know, not the enemy or the victims, you know, just make them think they're important. And, you know, like the false flag attacks make them feel like they've been attacked. Basically, that psychological deception and tactic, making it out like it's these terrorists attacking their soil and killing British people, say 7/7. and therefore make them feel like they're being protected, and therefore maintain their self-esteem of feeling important. You know, that's a psychological tactic. And if you know psychological, this is just my brain. I've never studied psychology, but working it out, decoding and stuff like that, you know. So yeah, you know what I mean. And you know, like, to avoid hurting the partner, to help the partner maintain their self-esteem, well, avoid hurting them with the truth that actually they're the victim, and you know what I mean, they're being victimized as much. You know, to avoid worrying the partner, this is another one, and protect the partner's relationship. Basically, you know, protect their partnership with the government, mainstream media. Avoid worrying them, as in worrying them so they stay deceived by the mainstream media, etc. And, you know, don't find out the truth so they start worrying and start seeing the truth. Then we'll move to partner motivated deception can be sometimes be viewed as socially polite and relationally beneficial. Deception used to, you know, basically, we can use that pattern motivated deception can be sometimes be viewed as socially polite and relationally beneficial. We can use that again to mainstream media, government / to you know, like the public, instead of relationships in general. And you know that deception can be viewed socially polite and beneficial, basically like false flag operations and what led to the wars. You know, the deception used that the government mainstream media come across as polite, and you know that it's basically a nice relationship and we're your friend and that. And you know, the beneficial thing is, you know, that if you help us protect us and go to the Middle East where these supposed Islamic terrorists are doing all these things, you know, it'll be beneficial to us and for your security, and we can take them out, basically. Deception used to be oppressed and inhumane for the deception for the motive of false flag wars. And then staying on motives again, self-focused motives, using deception to enhance or protect their self-image, wanting to shield themselves from anger, embarrassment or criticism. You know, that self-focused motives to do with media, government. You know, to protect themselves using deception from anger, embarrassment or criticism. You know, that's basically if they revealed the truth of what was really behind them, you know, it's to shield themselves from that so they don't get found out, criticised, embarrassed, and the anger, you know, from the public, you know what the truth was. Self-focused deception is generally perceived as more serious transgression than partner-focused deception, because the deceiver is acting for selfish reasons rather than the good of the relationship, right? So we'll go through this, what I read. Self-focused deception is generally received as more serious transgression than partner-focused deception. You know, that's that's more of like the thing, like what's really behind it. You know, it's like a selfish thing, you know, self-focused. It's selfish in first place. It's for their selfish deeds, you know, that they want to get it for resources, you know, to invade countries and stuff like that by making false flag operations, what I've been going on about. And, you know, and it's more self-transgression than partner-focused deception. Basically, you know, it's actually in their interest rather than what they're deceiving to the public to be partner focused for the public and them, you know, like democracy. You know, the deception is put across there because this is all based on deception. Because the deceiver, aka government, mainstream media, is acting for selfish reasons rather than for the good of the relationship between them and the, you know, the public. So, you know what I mean? This is just me decoding this from how my brain's, you know, analyses things with my skills. You know, and then we'll move on to just making sure. Moving on to relationship-focused motives. You know, relationship between the public and the government. Focused motives, using deception to limit relationship harm by avoiding conflict or relational trauma. Well, you know, the conflict and what they'd be avoiding from that, you know, and conflict and relational trauma would be with the public who is in this relationship with them, to avoid them finding out the truth from people like me, what they label as conspiracy nuts, but truth talk is really the real word. You know, to avoid them using that deception, they use, you know, making people believe in that they're talking the truth and not the conspiracy theories, you know, because if more people woke up, it's to avoid that conflict and relational trauma, what would happen, where people would realise the truth. Relationally motivated deception can be beneficial to a relationship, and other times it can be harmful by further complicated matters. You know, relationally motivated deception can be beneficial to a relationship. You know, that's like, you know, use that deception, what was on about. It can be beneficial to the deception they're using, you know, towards the public. Beneficial to them, because if they can keep them, you know, deceived by the deception they're putting across, it can be beneficial to them. Reverting back to that, if the public found out the truth, it wouldn't be so. And this is actually, as I said, I'll recap that this psychological deception is based on general relationships, friends and relationships with partners. But as I said, it can be applied to anything using what I'm talking about. And other times it can be harmful by further complicating matters. You know, basically for themselves, if the public found out about the truth. Alternatively, Buller and Burgu 1996 have proposed 3 taxonomies to distinguish motivations for deception based on their interpersonal deception theory. I'm assuming these 2 dudes, Buller and Burgu, whoever they were, who wrote about this, right? And, you know, instrumental to avoid punishment to protect resources, i.e. truth and conviction for false flag operations, you know. The deception used instrumental, which is they've used as the word, to avoid punishment. You know, basically, you know, to avoid the truth and therefore avoid punishment for doing crime themselves, false flag, which is, you know, killing innocent people for, you know, justifiable invasions of countries for their resources. Relational, to maintain relationships or bonds, keep public asleep from the truth, basically. Identity, to preserve face or the self-image, basically put on a front or act like there's something else to what they are. Image front of their true motive, you know, refer to the motive about false flag operations. And then we'll move on to detection, which is another one, all based on, and you know, deception, detection between relational partners is extremely difficult unless a partner tells a blatant or obvious lie or contradicts something to the other partner knows to be true. You know, basically, you know, this is a psychological deception technique based on what I've been on about, how these people do this and how you can use it. It's like a technique to how to fool your partner, or if it was used in government public relations, how to fool the public. You know, deception detection between relational partners, i.e. government, mainstream media and public, is extremely difficult unless a partner, aka government, tells a blatant or obvious lie that contradicts something to what the public knows to be true or partner. You know, basically, you know, and I'll use the clip that I'll use what I downloaded from a thing to do with 7/7 and Ian Blair on this video as an example. You know, like leaked information is something what they try to hide. Basically, conspiracy theorists is where they've used that deception, using that deception to put across conspiracy theorists nutters, and you know, they're just talking lies and all that stuff. You know, make ridicule them so they keep people asleep using this deception. While it is difficult to deceive a partner, aka public, over a long period of time, deception often occurs in day-to-day conversations between relational partners. Detecting deception is difficult because there are known completely reliable indicators of deception. Deception, however, places a significant cognitive load on the deceiver. He or she must recall previous statements so that his or her story remains consistently unbelievable. As a result, deceivers often leak important information, both verbally and non-verbally. Well, you know, based on that, and this is where we can tie this in with this theory, if you want to call it conspiracy, you know, to do with those powers what I talk about, you know, like the police and that, you know, based on that, you know, what they do in interrogation techniques, which I've analysed from things like, like films to like The Bill and stuff like that, and lots of other things. It's a technique they're taught by the governments who control them and use this psychological tactic where it leads from. They basically, when they interview suspects, what they do, if they're, like serious cases, they basically do an interrogation technique based on psychology and this, deception used, say, by a criminal to them. And basically what they do is they ask them questions because they know that the suspect may have made up a lie of deception where they know there's lies behind it and they know they're going to slip up. So what they do is this interrogation technique. They'll lock that suspect up and what they'll do is interview him the first time. And then a few hours later, they'll bring him out of their cell and they'll ask him questions again. But what they'll do is ask different questions using this psychological tactic. Because the suspect, if they've made this story up in their head, they'll be caught out if they're asked these different questions. I won't go too deep into it, but that's all I'll say. And this can connect to the same thing they can use mainstream media, false flag operations and stuff. So, it's all based in psychology. And, Mark Frank proposes that deception is detected at the cognitive level. Lying requires deliberate conscious behaviour, so listening to speech and watching body language are important factors in detecting lies. If a response to a question has a lot of disturbances, less talking time, repeated words and poor logical structure, then the person may be lying. And I will use another video clip, as an example from something to do with 7/7 again in London, which I'll use of Tony Blair. Using this thing, when I saw it the first time, I could see from analysing how he was talking and that without even researching this, I could tell by body language on everything I explained what was used, which I'll repeat again, which I could tell myself natural ability to see that Mark Frank proposes that deception is detected at the cognitive level. Lying requires deliberately conscious behaviour. So listening to speech and watching body language are important factors in detecting lies. If a response to a question has a lot of disturbances, less talking time, repeated words and poor logical structure, then that person may be lying. And then I'll go on to that video.
Trying to establish exactly what has happened. And there's a limit to what information I can give you, and I'll simply try and tell you the information as best I can at the moment. It's reasonably clear that there have been a series of terrorist attacks in London. There are obviously casualties, both people that have died and people seriously injured. And our thoughts and prayers, of course, are with the victims and their families. It's my intention to leave the G8 within the next couple of hours and go down to London and get a report face-to-face with the police and the emergency services and the ministers that have been dealing with this, and then to return later this evening. It is the will of all the leaders at the G8, however, that the meeting should continue in my absence, that we should continue to discuss the issues that we were going to discuss and reach the conclusions which we were going to reach. Each of the countries around that table has some experience of the effects of terrorism, and all the leaders, as they will indicate a little bit later, share our complete resolution to defeat this terrorism. It's particularly barbaric that this has happened on a day when people are meeting to try to help the problems of poverty in Africa and the long-term problems of climate change and the environment. Just as it is reasonably clear that this is a terrorist attack or a series of terrorist attacks, it's also reasonably clear that it is designed and aimed to coincide with the opening of the G8. There will be time to talk later about this. It's important, however, that those engaged in terrorism realize that our determination to defend our values and our way of life is greater than their determination to cause death and destruction to innocent people in a desire to impose extremism on the world. Whatever they do, it is our determination that they will never succeed in destroying what we hold dear in this country and in other civilized nations throughout the world. Thank you.
Tony Blair's brief address to the world community, who are obviously horrified.
And then we'll move on to fear specifically causes heightened arousal in liars, which manifests in more frequent blinking, pupil dilation, speech disturbances, and high-pitched voice. The liars that experience guilt have been shown to make attempts at putting a distance between themselves and the deceptive communication, producing non-immediary cues. These can be verbal or physical, including speaking in more indirective ways and showing an ability to maintain eye contact with their conversation partners. Another cue for detecting deceptive speech is a tone of speech itself. Streeter, Cross, Geller, Olson, and Apple 1977 have assessed that fear and anger, two emotions widely associated with deception, cause greater arousal than grief or indifference, and note that the amount of stress one feels is directly related to the frequency of the voice. So, we can use in that video as well, some aspects of that, what I analysed from that video. Especially like the eye contact thing you see on the video. Camouflage is another one used in this deception technique they use to deceive your partner, as they used, but as I said, can used in different aspects. Camouflage, the wallaby has adaptive coloration which allows it to blend in with its environment. The camouflage of a physical object often works by breaking up the visual boundary of that object. This usually involves colouring the camouflaged object with the same colours as the background against which the object will be hidden. In the realm of deceptive half-truths, camouflage is realised by hiding some of the truths. Military camouflage is a form of visual deception as a part of military deception. All I use is one example of camouflage, and if you actually do research into the 9/11 conspiracy to do with drone planes, I can use this as an example used in that deception they used to make it look like commercial airliners, which were actually drone planes. And if you look into that, do research instead of just being ignorant and closed-minded, that can be used. Basically they disguise what they use these drone planes, which were exactly the same size, radio controlled planes the same size as the commercial airplanes that supposedly crashed into the towers, and that's a form of deception using camouflage. Camouflaging, like a drone plane as a commercial airliner to fly into the towers, So that's just one example. And the disguise, this is another tactic using psychological deception to fool someone. A disguise is an appearance to create the impression of being somebody or something else. For a well-known person, this is called incognito. Passing involves more than mere dress and can include hiding one's real manner of speech. Basically, like looking like the oppressed by the public. Referring to what I said about, like wearing suits and dressing casual and that to make them look like normal, innocent people are just like you, and that's a tactic they can use, Passion involves more than mere dress and can include hiding one's real manner of speech. That's just basically one of the tactics they use. And they're saying for a well-known person, this is the incognito disguise, aka disguise camouflage, using the tactic where they, as I said, where they wear dress casual or visit hospitals and that, to deceive, the deception to make them look more innocent than they are. In a more abstract sense, disguise may refer to the act of disguising the nature of a particular proposal in order to hide an unpopular motivation or effect associated with that proposal. As I said, unpopular motivation would be what people would see as an unpopular motivation because of the lies and deception brought across to them. That's like unpopular motivation would be knowing that the motivation was, to kill innocent people on their own soil, 9/11, 7/7 for two examples. Using a lie of terrorists, but that would be unpopular to the public to know. So using that deception. Using the disguise thing, making the disguise being terrorists and that, would make it good for that deception technique. This is a form of political spin and propaganda. That's just saying something again, political spin or propaganda. The propaganda and political spin, especially propaganda, especially since 9/11, the propaganda was Bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, Middle East extremist, Islamic extremist. That's the propaganda that came from that, and that's what they used from that, using what I just explained. Rationalism and transfer within the technique of propaganda generation. So and there is an example from that article which I'll leave linked, depicting an act of war as a peace mission. When that just says everything what I've just explained. If you've never known about this and you've always you've always called people like me conspiracy nuts. That's just exactly the deception, depicting an act of war, basically invading the Middle East and everywhere else as a peace mission. But the deception was used that because it was. But the true motive behind it was to invade it for resources and that. And a lot of other things. This is what I pasted as well. Propaganda is a form of communication aimed towards influencing the attitude of a population, aka public, towards some cause or position, aka false wars, and the real motives behind them. Propaganda is information that is not impartial, basically treating all rivals or disputants equally, fair and just, despite, propaganda is information that is not impartial. Basically, it's impartial means treating rivals, aka what we would call Al-Qaeda in the Middle East, equally fair and just. And therefore, it's not impartial. It's actually, not treating them fair. Using bias, using the deception they used. And used primarily to influence an audience, aka the public, and further an agenda. Often by presenting facts selectively. That's just saying that all of it, the agenda is, to invade the Middle East, or was, and, all these false flag operations, by presenting facts selectively. And then we'll refer back to what I said before, Edward Snowden, where he says what they do, they present facts selectively, they don't show you the full story. And using that deception, this is all based on deception propaganda. Perhaps by lying by omission, the action of excluding or leaving out someone or something. That's basically something, facts mainly, leaving out the full story. To encourage a particular synthesis or using loaded messages to produce an emotional rather than rational response to the information presented. We can refer back to things like 9/11, the first where it started, and 7/7. Emotional response rather than rational response. Emotional response was, as I said, fear, shock, upset. People were fearing their safety. The shock from it happening on their own soil. Upset people were killed in that. 7/7 and 9/11, all based on psychology. Because that's again psychology. This is what they use against you. Psychology. Fear, shock, and upset. They're psychological. Their minds, their emotions and reactions from the mind. While the term propaganda has acquired a strongly negative connotation by association with its most manipulative and jihadistic examples, jihadism is patriotism in the form of aggressive foreign policy. Jihadism, sorry, I can't even say that word, also refers to a country's advocacy for the use of threats of actual force as opposed to peaceful relations in efforts to safeguard what it perceives as national interest. So we'll go back for that. And this is part of propaganda and what I'm talking about, deception. Jiganism is patriotism in the form of aggressive foreign policy. Basically, like we can use that, using people's deception of being patriots in the form of aggressive foreign policy. Basically like Islam and all that stuff they said, where they're being aggressive and they're attacking them. Jiganism also refers to a country's advocacy for the use of threats of actual force as opposed to peaceful relations, in efforts to safeguard what is perceived as its national interest. Well, as I said, using the threats made up as Islam and all that, and the force as opposed to the peaceful relationships in efforts to safeguard what it perceives. Basically, safeguard the truth that it wasn't Islam and it was false flag for its national interest. Its national interest would have been, to the government who made it up false flag, to invade the Middle East and stuff like that, everything like that, basically, and a lot of stuff behind that, to hide the truth. Propaganda in its original sense was neutral and could refer to uses that were generally positive. Let's read that again, my mind just went off focus. Propaganda in its original sense was neutral and could refer to its uses that were generally positive, such as public health recommendations, signs encouraging citizens to participate in a census of election, or messages encouraging persons to report crimes and law enforcement. So what they're saying is propaganda was also used for good purposes, but because they know it's a psychological tactic that could be used for good, it could also be used for evil intentions, because people's minds is what, anything, as I said, their minds can be used against them using that technique they use, subliminal near enough it was, without them realising. And there's another one I said, dazzle, and there's an example, right? The defensive mechanisms of most octopuses to reject black ink in a large cloud to aid in escape from predators. The use by some allied, can't even read that, man. Navies during World War II of dazzle camouflage painting schemes to confuse observers regarding a naval vessel's speed from heading. I'm not really sure. I'll try and work that out while I read that. The use of some allied navies during World War II of dazzle camouflage painting schemes to confuse observers regarding a naval vessel's speed. I'm not really sure on that one, I'll try and get back to that. We'll move on to simulation, right? Simulation consists of exhibiting false information. There are 3 simulation techniques: mimicry, copying another model, fabrication, making up a new model, and distraction, offering an alternative model. Well, simulation, we can use that thing like 9/11 and 7/7. Basically, they were near enough simulated, Simulation consists of exhibiting false information. There are 3 simulation techniques: mimicry, copying another model, fabrication. That's like mimicry, mimicking, like the 9/11, especially the 9/11 thing, it refers to more mimicking, copying the same planes, what looked exactly like the commercial planes that hit the towers, using drone planes though, they're mimicking that, and they simulated it to look like that, but behind the story, you'll find out that they were drone planes. And then we move on to fabrication. To make something that in reality is not what it appears to be. For example, in World War II, it was a common for the Allies to use hollow tanks made out of cardboard to fool German reconnaissance planes into thinking the large army unit was on the move in one area, while the real tanks were well hidden and on the move in the location from a fabricated dummy tanks. Fabrication, basically what I could get from that, like inside job, basically fabrication using false stuff, false information, drone planes itself, stuff like that, and where they put demolitions and stuff like that, controlled demolition explosives in the towers. It's just fabricated, it's used from that deception, but the people, it's like false evidence. you know, if someone, you know, in your real life situation, if someone, you know, sent a text from someone else's phone saying, you know, this is, you know what I mean, this is from this lady this is from this dude who's been senior lady or something, and you saw that, you know, that's fabricated from someone who's against your mate. They're using that fabrication. You know, it's easy to use fabrication, and, you know, like 9/11, 7/7 are decent examples of what they did. Distraction, to get someone's attention from the truth by offering bait or something else more tempting to divert attention away from the truth being concealed. For example, a security company you know, like, for example, a government publicly announces a terror attack on one route, while in reality take a different route. You know, says terror attacking, you know, the distraction was, you know, why people were distracted by this terror attack, and the different route obviously was to invade, their true motive in that was to invade the Middle East and that, but the distraction they used against people, you know, like, they refer back to the motive, what I started with. And this is where I refer to where a problem reaction solution technique, again based on psychological deception. And, you know, I said on a recording before, man, I'll say it again, you know, like, with this problem reaction solution thing, before I go into false flag, the method they use in that, you know, it can be used, say, if the police, as I said, right, say if the police, as an example, not saying it's just an example, you know, wanted to put secret surveillance in your home or take away your privacy rights. If they wanted to, and they were corrupt, right, if they were the corrupt ones, not honest ones, they could basically cause this problem where they could get some make up that these, you know, like, criminals invade your home and attack your family and tie them up and harm your kids and that. And then, you know, your reaction would be, from this problem reaction solution, the reaction would be fear for your security, fear for your family, kids, everything like that, right? That would be the natural reaction. And then the fear from that, you'd call to phone the police. And then their method, the solution would be, you know, for them to take away your rights by putting surveillance, saying, oh yeah, you'll be safe now. But, you know, the thing is, this deception they use, the same as false flag, they actually plan this problem reaction solution thing. Problem, attack, reaction, fear, fear for safety, solution, you know, to protect you, taking away your rights. You know, that's an example. You know, as I said, if the police wanted to and they got some people to pretend to be criminals, it's the same as using the same method, psychological deception, and people's things against them as false flag operations. The government make up some terrorists, or AKA 7/7, which are no set up for Muslim men who, from 9/11, where that deception was used, that it was Islam, you know, to be criminals, but they're not, you know, and then, you know, to do the 7/7 thing, where everyone will react with fear for their security, and that the same as if it was a personal thing. And then the solution will be taking away your privacy rights, or either having to invade the Middle East and stuff for resources to get more money. So you can see how this works, all deception, using people's fears to their own minds against them. And, you know, this is all based on, you know, all that stuff. And then we can refer to another, because, you know, this recording will be short as possible, but, you know, again, someone who used like their deception, you know, against their enemy. But this was Sun Tzu, right, who I referred to at the start. This dude studied psychology, but to use against his enemy. And, well, the same application could be used for governments and mainstream media against the public as their enemy. And, you know, the things what I've read from just reading them, my mind could work out as a different application. You know, like, appear weak when you were strong, and strong when you were weak. And basically, you know, appear weak when you were strong. You know, like a false flag attack, you know what I mean, appear the country is weak and security is weak, but really we're strong, using that deception because we've made it up. But we'll make out that, you know what I mean, as referring to that clip I used of Tony Blair and all that, you know, where he was making out like, you know what I mean, he was shocked and that, and we're really shocked and we're helpless and that of what's happened. But really, underneath, they're strong, you know. So that's just what Sun Tzu used, is that, you know, the deception thing. to do with war as well, ironically, is what led from 7/7, you know, where he stayed in power and the stuff with the Middle East. The supreme act of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Well, you know, the enemy will be you as the general public, you know, and to subdue you without them fighting you. Basically, the supreme art of the deception they use is to, without fighting you, is to use your own mind against you, using things like that, false flag attacks. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not to fear the result of 100 battles. Well, they know you as the public, and they know themselves, and so they don't need to fear the result of a battle. Basically, fear the result of, you know, if they know you and they know how you work, analysing how you react to those things they use against you. They study you, you know, in the first place. They don't have to result the consequences of people waking up and staying asleep using this deception technique, right? And this is all psychology based, you know what I mean? This isn't even conspiracy. And this is even based on what they do. This is what Sun Tzu said in the first place. But, you know, this is how it can use in any application. So, you know what I mean? And as I said, right, referring back to the mainstream media, you know, since TV was around the 50s or whatever, they've been analysing the public, how they reacted to wars and things like terror attacks, like these IRA things, which were also false flag, what they made out to be. But, you know, they analysed you, how you psychologically reacted as the public to all these things for all those years. And that's where it comes along to, if you know the enemy, where they know you as their enemy. You know, they know how you are because they know how you react, and why they referring to the problem reaction solution. They've studied you, analysed you psychologically. And therefore they don't have to fear the result, because they've kept you asleep and kept you so gullible from all these things, you know, using that deception. So they never have to fear the rebellion of people realising the truth behind it. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained you will also suffer a defeat. Well, what he was saying, and that is, if you know yourself and not the enemy, aka if they know how they work but they don't know how you work, the general public, aka what I refer to, how you react to things, for every victory gained, aka for every time they fool you, if they don't know you and they can't fool you, you will suffer a defeat. Basically, more people will wake up and know their secrets and the real story behind these false flag attacks. And this is just from reading these and, you know, coming up with what I can work out using a different application, what Sun Tzu used. Supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. So supreme excellence consists of breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. You know, basically that's again using what he used, psychological deception, without having to fight them physically, but using their mind against them. You know, breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. That's basically saying, you know, using the deception. So your public resistance, aka revolution, you know, waking up and seeing the truth. Just sit there and you use the mainstream media and against them, you know, to fool them with perception and deception. So therefore they can sit there and use that and fool you while they attack countries from false flag operations. And then another one he used was, let your plans be dark and let your plans be dark and impenetrable. Sorry, sometimes I fuck up on words. As night, and when you move, fall like a thunderbolt, right? So, you know, like dark and impenetrable. Oh, fuck's sake, sorry, I sound retarded, but sorry, I didn't mean to use that word. As night, when you move, fall like a thunderbolt. You know, like dark as night. Basically, you know, make sure your enemy, aka the public. So if we refer to NWO and this conspiracy, that, you know, make them be dark as night, basically hidden from the public and that, right? So, you know what I mean, when you move on them, you fall like a thunderbolt, you strike them, you know, catch them with their pants down. So basically on the conspiracy of this New World Order thing, aka we'll call it martial law to make it more, you know what I mean, make more sense. If you research what a martial law is, it's basically dictating a nation without them having rights. New World Order is another word for that. So, you know, the plans, aka the New World Order / World Martial Law, be dark as night. Basically, you know, so people don't know the truth behind it, using the deception. So when you move on the world and bring on this world martial law, no world order, you strike them with, like a thunderbolt. You know, you hit them hard. You know, you strike them with their pants down without them realising. And this is what was based on that conspiracy, what I was on about. And then we'll move on to victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war and first and then seek to win. Well used on this deception, victorious warriors win first and then go to war. Using this deception, you know, the government, aka media, win first, aka using this deception on the public, brainwashing them with lies and not the whole truth, and then go to war, aka invade the Middle East and everywhere else. You know, while defeated as well, aka deception, using the deception while defeated by false flag operation attacks. You know, so, you know, basically, while defeated by a false flag attack, what they made up, making it look like they're defeated using a deception, they then win from using that deception put across to the public, and then they can invade a country, aka go to war. Another Sun Tzu quote, with staying on this, because this is a lot of things he used, using psychological deception to fool his enemy. All warfare is based on deception. Sorry, I don't know why my brain's so fucked up. All warfare is based on deception. Hence, when we are able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must appear inactive. When we are near, we must take the enemy believe we are far away. When far away, we must make him believe we are near. So, you know, he is just basically saying, again, all warfare, all wars are based on deception. And, you know, we can refer to, and if you do research on this, the Mossad, and what I've been talking about, the Israeli connection, which Mossad are Israeli Secret Service. You know, if you look at, you know, look at that itself, their motto is, by deception, thou shalt do war, you know. And this is the same dude, this is a dude called Sun Tzu, who used this tactic, you know, where he's saying himself, where he made this psychological deception used for warfare, to use deception to, you know, to make wars. And then he's, you know, basically from thou shalt do war, from deception thou shalt do war, false flag operations, that we are able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must appear inactive. When we are so, you know what I mean, what they're saying, you know, is the deception is, you know, used on this NWO again, aka martial law.
Well, I mean, look, when you're talking about Illuminati, you're discussing a secret society. That's what people talk about, secret societies. But I remind people not to be alarmist about this. You know, if there are people out there who are watching this who say, you know, Technica, you're saying the Illuminati isn't real. No, I'm saying that you don't need to come up with some fantastical, you know, story about a secret cabal of people who wear masks and, you know what I mean, they be having, you know, sex in a weird room with strangers, like that Tom Cruise movie, and, you know what I mean, remove your clothes and all. You know, come on, man. You don't need to take it to that extreme. If you're looking to talk about people that make decisions for other people's lives without you having any say-so whatsoever in it, then you have no further to look for than a corporation, than a giant conglomerate. For example, how about one like Monsanto, which is something that has been completely glazed over in the wake of Trayvon and in wake of the Paula Deen sensationalizing, which the media has held on to. We haven't talked about the fact that Monsanto had this quote-unquote Monsanto Protection Act that Obama betrayed America by signing, where they don't have to label their goods as genetically modified. In other words, for anybody watching this program, when you go to the supermarket with your children and there's two products, and one of them says this product was made with 100% organic goods, you know, blah, here's the stamp, and this other product says this product was made with genetically engineered parts that have been known to cause cancer in laboratory animals. Which one would you choose? Here's the problem with you saying you would choose any of them. You don't have the ability to choose. They've taken that away from you because they won't even let you know what that is. You know? I think that when we discuss Illuminati and when we discuss secret societies, we have no further to look than the corporations, than the Food and Drug Administration. You know, these are real conspiracies. Somebody out there gave a lot of money to a certain campaign for them to be put in that position, and they expect favor back from their politicians. Honestly, I'm sorry. I've always thought that lobbying was legal bribery. And my opinion's not going to change because some idiot writes some uninformed post beneath this video and tells me, oh, well, lobbying is necessary because you're paying people to listen to you and you're promising them more money when they do. You don't have to talk about Adam Weishaupt. You don't have to talk about, you know, medieval Europe and people dressed in robes and blood sacrifices. No, it's a corporation. When people talk about Jay and they were mad at him, they said he was part of Illuminati. Why? It was because the Magna Carta came with an app that asked you to give all the personal contact information, that asked you to have access to your Twitter or your Facebook where they spam the hell out of you. That seems to people like some secret society corporate stuff. That's why they call it Illuminati. As to whether he's really part of a Masonic cult, I don't know, dude. Like I told you before, I don't hang out with these niggas. If I did, I could tell you right now, I'd be like, well, you know, Ye's a Mason or he's not. But I don't hang out with them niggas. So I can't speak on somebody else's reality. But I do know this much, that if you want to talk about Illuminati, if you want to talk about secret societies, you don't have to go into the fantastical world of your imagination. There are lots of examples of people that make decisions about your life which you are powerless to control, that are ready to be examined, that are right in front of you. You know, George Carlin said it best. He said, you have the illusion of choice in America. Your real choice, he said, is Pepsi and Coke. You don't get to make a choice about whether we all go to war. If this was the democracy, when George Bush wanted to invade Iraq, he would have come to the people of the United States and said, America, you know, we feel like there still may be, you know, chemical or nuclear weapons in Iraq. And America would have said, we'll go to war, yes, but if you're wrong, someone's got to pay the price for all this. Or, we don't believe you, Mr. Bush. We think you're lying. You know, release the tapes of the plane hitting the Pentagon, release the tapes of a million other things, you know, have some more transparency in government, and then, you know, we'll see if we allow you to put our men and women in harm. Because realistically, we found out that Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction, and that really we were looking for a regime change. And that's not something that I think Americans were willing to sacrifice their sons and daughters for in terms of this war. We thought we were in imminent threat after 9/11, and that's why we did it. So when people talk about Illuminati or when people talk about secret society, I think that they see it as anybody that strives to be part of that world, that strives to be part of the system. You know what I mean? That wants to be included, that wants to marry into the royalty. You know, I think that when it comes to those two, I think that they enjoy it. They probably play off from it and use it to get free press from people. I think that at some point, you know, we have to accept that this is a part of entertainment, and if people are using that imagery, they're using it because they want to draw people into the conversation and into making them a topic in their lives.
You're in business with Def Jam and you're helping them.
And then we'll move on to as another thing. There's quite a few that this dude said, but when you listen to this recording, right, because I don't know if this is being dubbed out while I record it, but when you listen to this recording, if you really are interested in psychology itself, you'll see how it can work. But here's another one. Sun Tzu said, engage people with what they expect. It is what they are able to discern and confirms their projections. It settles them in predictable patterns of response, occupying their minds while you wait for the extraordinary moment that they cannot anticipate, right? And I said this at the start of the recording, and I've put it in again, after what I've been saying, so you can understand what I've been putting across more whilst quoted at the start. But engage people with what they expect. It is what they're able to discern and confirms their projections, right? Using that analysis of how you've reacted, especially since 9/11, and the public, as the public, you expect it, and what they expect as much as you expect, the problem, reaction, solution, it's always going to be fear, and then you'll give in from your fears to say, yeah, you can do this war and that, because it's what you are able to discern and confirms your projections, is what the projections, what's been put into your mind using that deception they put across. They've fooled you so many times, especially since 9/11, that it gets easier for them to do every time. It settles them in predictable patterns of response, occupying their minds. Why that bit refers especially to the problem, reaction, solution thing, what David Icke says himself. Predictable patterns of response. As I said, the predictable patterns of response is the reaction, the fear thing. Everyone's became predictable across the world from those false flag attacks. They've analysed you and realised. Occupying their minds while you wait for the extraordinary moment, aka them, that which they cannot anticipate. Basically, the extraordinary moment, the conspiracy of the New World Order. Because you're distracted by the deception and how you always fall for it. Why that extraordinary moment, which you will not be able to anticipate, is this NWO World Martial Law thing. Basically, you can't anticipate it because you still call people like me conspiracy theorists and nutters, and you'll be so shocked that this was true when it hits you, And this is all the psychological deception they use against you. Another one, he said, if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will never succumb in every battle. So basically, they need to know you mainly for them to win every time, using that art of deception, the psychological deception to keep you asleep, so they can, make more money, blah, 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 proceed to the NWO, etc., right? And then we'll move on to another one. I think I've nearly got through all of them. There's a few more, and then this recording will be finished. Really nearly close now, but engage people with what they expect. It is what they're able to discern and confirms their projections. I think I've already gone through that one. Don't know why I repeated that one. Let's move on to this. The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road of either safety or to ruin. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which on no account can be neglected. And I think I said this one further back, the art of war, aka the art of deception, put across to the psychological deception through mainstream media to the public, is vital importance to the country in which they do it. It is a matter of life and death, a road to either safety or ruin. Basically, a road to keeping the public asleep from the truth, or to ruin, aka to the public waking up and going a revolution and realising rebellion because they realise how evil we're there. Hence, it is a subject of inquiry which of no account cannot be neglected, right? And that's basically the subject of inquiry, making sure that people don't wake up and inquire about why they're questioning about what they've heard about the story they've been told from the mainstream media, so on no account can be neglected, aka violated, or the truth revealed. And then treat your men as you would. This is another one Sun Tzu said. Treat your men, which he was referring to as to his soldiers, as you would your own son, right? And basically what the government mainstream media can do, treat the public as you would as your own sons, your own people. And they will follow you into the deepest valley, right? So if they use that deception, as I said, referring to being humane, kind and that, and all that stuff, and all the other deception they use, make you feel like that you're important and you're not inferior and you're important, you know. And then the public has seen what they do. They will follow you into the deepest valley. You know, you listen to everything they say because they use that deception, you know. And then another one, and this is the last two quotes which I used, but it's got loads. If you read, and you can work out through what you used. So in war, the way is to avoid what is strong and strike at what is weak. So, you know, we can use a couple of examples of what Sun Tzu said from this. In the war of deception, the way is to avoid what is strong. Basically, if we refer to and strike what is weak, if we use the media psychological deception, you know, to avoid what is strong, basically avoid, you know, being found out for our secrets, the full story behind our false flag operations, and avoid being detected by people who find out our secrets. And then strike what is weak in the psychological deception, strike the public. They're weak because they see you as weak, they see you as inferior, they know you're gullible, you know, using this psychological deception. And they strike you with this psychological deception of false flag attacks, using that fear against you and everything, you know, so you stay like sheep and follow everything they say. And, you know, they avoid what is strong, aka avoid people like me. And if we do come along and they use that technique where they fool you into thinking we're nutters and that, even though we've got, you know, decent backup and critical thinking to what we say, what questions there, you know, what they stated, and what has more backup to what they put across, and things that contradict that. So, you know, this psychological deception is already also based on the masses, you know, because they know the more people that wake up, the less powerful they'll be. Because, you know, as it said, they're the 1% of the world, and you are the 99%. The world, 7 billion or more people, are the 99%, and they are 1%. And, you know, they use this deception to keep you awake, the psychological deception to keep you asleep, So, you know, they can continue fooling you. So when this world martial law, in other terms of New World Order, comes along, where you'll be dictated to and your rights taken away, you know, if you don't rebel and wake up, they can use that. So in war, you know, they avoid the people who can expose them and, you know, strike at the public with the deception they use to keep you asleep. And this is what Sun Tzu used, but in war tactics, you know, in warfare, but it can be used in different applications, aka mainstream media, on the public. So yeah, you know, and to win, and this is the last one I'll leave, and I think that'll be the end of the recording. To win 100 victories is 100 battles is not the acme of skill. To subdue the enemy without fighting is the acme of skill. You know what it's saying on that. To win 100 victories and 100 battles is not the acme of skill. You know what it's saying, the main part of that, to subdue the enemy without fighting is the acme of skill. You know, referring not to war and as generals, you know, what generals use, but to refer to mainstream media, government, corporate-owned media. To subdue the enemy, to subdue the public without fighting is the skill. Basically, what his main principle was of this art of war is using psychological deception against the enemy. You know, to subdue you with, you know, with lies and keep you asleep. You know, show you not the full story, what you're led to believe. And again, without fighting, you know, you just use your mind against you. So you can see how psychological deception can be used as a tool, you know, and, you know, you can do research on it. It can be used in as I said, what I said further up in the recording, you know, like interrogation techniques. That's basically like the police against the criminal, right? You know, the criminal is the enemy, the police is the good person, saying that's good cops against the enemy. You know, that's another way of doing it, you know, the interrogation technique, to make them spill the beans. So, you know, it can be used in a lot of things, interrogation in the army and stuff like that. You know, psychology is one thing that people's used against them, you know. You know, even when it comes to physical torture, they know they use that against their victims when people torture people, because they know their psychological fear is the fear of pain, because they know they're projecting what their own fear is. So they know that their enemy's fear will be the same, especially if their enemy gives away what their weakness is, you know, like Nas says on this track, right? Enemies will only move on you if they know what your weakness is. And anyone knows in life, if they've got people who hate them or whatever, if they give away their fear, say they you know what I mean, say that, I don't know, I'm scared of this, I'm scared of that. If the person who hates him knows what makes him upset, basically, or, you know, what they're scared of, they'll use that against them, you know, and that is using psychology against that person, using what's on their mind against them. So you can see how, you know, like psychological deception and psychology can be used as a bigger tool without, you know, actually physically touching your enemy, as Sun Tzu used as his tactics of war and that. So, you know what I mean? This is the same thing, basically. You know what the corporate-owned media, government-owned medias do with the public, with the brainwashing system, the TV, the newspapers and that. So, you know, this is an easier way of explaining it without even going deep into the, if you find it too insane or you're too close-minded and ignorant about this New World Order thing, you know, this is another way to see it, how easy it is or could be done, you know, to make you actually critically think and see more of it to a, you know what I mean, another level. And, you know, there are things obviously used from deception is why they use deception in the first place, because the deception they're using, deception is to deceive, aka not tell you the truth and tell you lies, and that's the main tactic of psychological deception. So you know what I mean, that's the only way I can put it across, and I don't know if I can wake more people up, but I mean, if you listen to this video or whatever, watch it, if you can share it and explain, you know, to anyone on your friend list or wherever you share it, that this is based less on a NWO conspiracy and all that shit, and it's based actually on psychological deception and what I explained, maybe we can wake more people up in that. You know, we can only hope in that, because, you know, all I can tell you now is, you know, like I'm a political activist / MC, right? You know, and I'm doing this out of good intention, you know, to help everyone, you know, out across the world, because morally, you know, what I've discovered from seeing through the psychological deception, what was put across me as a kid and for many years, you know, I'm seeing a lot of people across the world have been victimised in many countries, mainly third world, but even in America, England, where I'm living, UK, and a lot of places, you know, victimised by these people. And, you know, these people are innocent and been made to look like the oppressors and that, you know. And, you know, before I leave out, I will put in that quote on this video and make, you know, what Malcolm X said, where, you know, again with online media's deception, where he said, if you're not careful, the newspapers or have you believe in the oppressors are being oppressed and the oppressed are being the oppressors, you know. That can be used with a lot of things, what I've discovered, you know, like Palestine, the oppressed and being made to look like the oppressors, and Israel are the, you know, the vice versa and that. And the same as, you know, a lot of things, but that's an example. But, you know, like Afghanistan and that, you know, there's a lot of things, you know, even Islam itself against the Western, well, Israel and that and all that. There's a lot of things behind it, you know. And it's all using psychological deception, using everyone's own minds against them. And everyone can see, you know, if from this recording, if they actually were closed-minded and they get to see it from this aspect, and they do realise and they wake up from it, they'll even see themselves that they've been fooled with their own mind used against them. So, you know what I mean? It is easy, you know. It's easy to use your enemy's own mind against them than actually hit them with physical force, you know, which is what I said, what Sun Tzu used mainly as one of his tactics.
He was talking about, you know what I mean? The
so yeah, that's
Muslim
what I was saying.
being brought,
you know, I've tried to keep it as short as possible, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed listening to that, and hopefully I can wake more people up so they see, you know,
create a vortex that would draw
what's behind, you know, like the scenes behind closed doors and stuff, more than what have been shown.
Change worlds.
Right, peace.
And if you have a global
again.
agenda,
Signing out.
then global problems allow you to offer global solutions. And if you look how the world was transformed by the First World War and the Second World War, the world was a completely different place after both of those wars. And the idea all along has been to have a third world war to complete the transformation into a global state with a world government and a world army dictating to the global population.
Chapter 8. Variation in tactics. Sun Tzu said, "In war, the general receives his commands from the sovereign, collects his armies, and concentrates his forces. When in difficult country, do not encamp. In country where high roads intersect, join hands with your allies. Do not linger in dangerously isolated positions. In hemmed-in situations, you must resort to stratagem. In desperate positions, you must fight. There are roads which must not be followed, armies which must not be attacked, towns which must not be besieged, positions which must not be contested, commands of the sovereign which must not be obeyed." The general who thoroughly understands the advantages that accompany variation in tactics knows how to handle his troops. The general who does not understand these may well be acquainted with the configuration of the country, yet he will not be able to turn his knowledge into practical account. So the student of war who is unversed in the art of war, of varying his plans, even though he may be acquainted with the 5 advantages, will fail to make the best use of his men. Hence, in the wise leader's plans, considerations of advantage and of disadvantage will be blended together. If our expectation of advantage be tempered in this way, we may succeed in accomplishing this essential part of our schemes. If, on the other hand, in the midst of difficulties we are always able to seize an advantage, we may extricate ourselves from misfortune, reduce the hostile chiefs by inflicting damage on them, and make trouble for them, and keep them constantly engaged. Hold out specious allurements, and make them rush to any given point. The art of war teaches us to rely not on the likelihood of the enemy's not coming, but on our own readiness to receive him, not on the chance of his attacking, but rather on the fact that we have made our position unassailable. There are 5 dangerous faults which may affect the general. 1. Recklessness, which leads to destruction. 2. Cowardice, which leads to capture. 3. A hasty temper, which can be provoked by insults. 4. A delicacy of honor, which is sensitive to shame. 5. Over solicitude for his men, which exposes him to worry and trouble. These are the 5 besetting sins of a general, ruinous to the conduct of war. When an army is overthrown and its leader slain, the cause will surely be found among these 5 dangerous faults. Let them be subject of meditation.
The reason, therefore, that Israel is the biggest recipient of American aid and military support is because this hand called the House of Rothschild takes the money from the United States and hands it to this hand called Israel of the House of Rothschild and says thank you very much. The reason that there's no questioning of Israeli nuclear capability, that they get away literally with mass murder time and time again, is because the House of Rothschild also controls the countries of the European Union and controls the European Union. I mean, Tony Blair is a yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir, how high would you like me to jump sir, frontman for the House of Rothschild. So who do they put in after he left the British government as negotiator of peace in Israel? Tony bloody Blair. What should I say, Mr. Rothschild? Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And that's it. So when you've got the same force controlling all these different agencies, then of course they're going to be coordinated. That's why Israel gets away with what it gets away with. And if people think that's anti-Semitic, well, actually anti-Semitic means anti-Arab, by the way, then they'll have to take it and shove it somewhere where the sun don't shine. Because I ain't shutting up about this, because it's fundamental to understanding the world and to understanding the European Union and world events. The Jewish people, in general, have been mercilessly used by the House of Rothschild and their front secret society, satanic secret society called Zionism, as a front which they can hide behind. So it is House of Rothschild organizations like B'nai B'rith, Sons of the Covenant, who created an organization called the Anti-Defamation League, which goes around defaming everyone, ironically, who have not just campaigned for hate laws that stop you exposing these people. They've actually written the bloody legislation in America, in North America, and Canada. And so these hate laws, which say you can't say this, you can't say that because that's prejudice and all that, they're not there to protect gay people. Everyone to their own, I say. I can care less. They're not there to protect Jewish people or minorities. They're there simply to stop legitimate investigation of the Rothschilds and its network. That's what they're there for. And they are in so many ways the Rothschilds. At operational level, the center of the spider's web. And they need to be exposed, because if they get exposed and they go, when I say go, they are removed from their positions of power. Because, to be honest, if they went to jail for what they have been responsible for, the House of Rothschild, they would have to reincarnate hundreds of times to complete the sentence. And we've ignored them, or we've not ignored them. People have ignored their power for long enough because they've brilliantly hidden it. It needs the light shone on it, because when they come down, in so many ways, the House of Cards comes down. Thank you very much.
If London could survive the Blitz, it can survive 4 miserable bombers like this. I'm not saying there are 4 bombers, 4 miserable events like this.